And today we have a special guest who has experienced one of the hardships, greatest hardships, I think, that you can endure, and somehow was able to manage it and handle it in a way that I think is truly amazing. So, hope you'll all welcome to the church, J.J. Kearnes. Come on up. I asked J.J. if he'd ever spoken in a church before, and he said no. This will be the first time. But he has worked at a car dealership here in Norman, different car dealerships for a long time, so he's used to talking to people. So in fact, he worked with Aubrey for a long time. So thanks for doing this.
Well,
I know this is
kind
kind
of
of
out of your, it's a pleasure to
out of your
be
comfort
here.
zone, but thanks for doing it.
My pleasure.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about where you were born and kind of the family you grew up in?
I was born in Pittsburgh, Kansas, and shortly after that, my dad headed for California, and we ended up in Bristow, Oklahoma, and moved to Ardmore at 2 years old, and I stayed there till I was 13. I belonged to the K Street Baptist Church there, and moved up a little older. We went to the First Baptist Church downtown in Ardmore, and that's where I was accepted Christ and was baptized in about 1957. And
I know exactly where that is. I have a brother-in-law and sister family that lives down there right on Main Street. They had a jewelry shop right across from that big church.
And I kind of always call Ardmore my home because I moved from Ardmore to Oklahoma City in 1960, and that was a big city. But Ardmore was just a small enough town that you felt like you could call it home. And graduated high school and went into the service from there and started my life.
And so when did you move to Norman and out by the lake?
I moved to Norman in 1979. I bought the land in '74 and finally managed to get a house built on. I bought 10 acres and managed to get a house built on it and moved in July the 15th, 1979.
And so you were then married at about what age, and when did the kids come along?
Married, got back out of the Navy in 1967 and was married 68, and then first son came along, and 3 years later the second son came along, and trying to start my life and provide for my family, and everything was, going. I mean, like everybody else, you all struggle to make ends meet, but everything was working hard and everything was, coming along.
Well, I think we have a couple of pictures of, did you already show that one, Kim, before that? Yeah, there they are. There's Angela on the left, probably her high school picture. My sisters have a lot of pictures that look exactly like that. The big hair and everything.
The big hair.
And then here they are with their two sons, and what are their names?
Scotty and Steve.
Okay. And I wanted to ask you how you first heard that your wife Angela had been involved in an accident.
At the time, I was working for Donnelly Publishing, selling yellow pages in the Metro, and some friends of mine were in the auto parts business, and they needed some stores reset in Texas. So I took a week off. I could go make some extra money, and came home that Friday afternoon. The wife was working in the yard, and of course, she knew I was leaving. She said, "Well, I think I'm going to go to a party tonight with my nephew, Scott Long," which had moved down from Kansas City, one of the people at this grocery store he works at. So we left town at around 4:30 that evening. And we drove to, we were in Longview, Texas. We checked in there for the night. And about 1 in the morning, I just sat up in bed and I thought, I don't know why. Come up wide awake. Of course, went back to sleep, and about 5, I received a phone call from my father-in-law, and said, we called her Booty. Booty was her nickname. Said, "Booty's been in a car wreck." And I said, "Well, everything okay?" And he said, "No," said she was dead. And so kind of spiraled out on that, and my friends came up and took me over to the airport there and got me a ticket, and so I could get back to Oklahoma City.
Do you recall what went through your mind or your emotions when you heard those words? I mean, your father-in-law just came right out and said it. I mean,
well, you're stunned, just numb. I mean, things about it was she never went anywhere without me. I would have probably been driving if we'd been at home. It could have been that. It could have happened because she never went out. You know, never. She raised the kids and was always there every night and day after school. She hadn't worked since early days, and I was just stunned, flabbergasted. You know, you're trying to. Of course, everything's rolling through your head, and how are we going to handle it? What are we going to do? And
Yeah. So you jumped on a plane then, and when you got back, I mean, you didn't go to the hospital. Where did you go when you came back?
My brother-in-law picked me up at the airport, and I went over to my father-in-law's house, and we just kind of discussed everything. And of course, he was kind of bitter, and of course, the thing now is get your feet back on the ground and go in a positive direction and try to make some sense of everything.
Mm-hmm. So when you heard, when was it that you heard that the person who had caused the accident that took your wife's life had been drinking? When did you hear that? When you got to your father-in-law's house, or when did you find that out? Do you remember?
I really don't remember. Truthfully, do not remember how that came about. But
do you remember how you felt when you heard that part, that component of it? How did that affect you?
Well, I cannot be a hypocrite. You live in a glass house, you don't throw bricks. So it was just something that happened in life, the wrong place, the wrong time, and the cards were dealt. It was just something that happened. It's an accident.
Well, you know, a lot of us here at some times in our life have done things, whether it's drinking or driving, where we were stoned or high, and it could happen to many of us. I would say probably the majority of us in this place at some time or another. The same thing could have happened, and we kind of lucked out. You know, it didn't happen.
That's
and
right.
We don't have to live with the guilt of taking someone else's life and knowing what we did to another family and so on and so forth. But, you know, in that particular case, I don't know. I mean, personally, I think I would be pretty upset about that, even though I know I wouldn't have a right to be, you know, but I think I would be pretty frustrated and pretty angry that it happened in that way. But you didn't feel that so much?
I'm sure I was a little upset, but it's something that you can't change, you can't unwind.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever, in this situation, did you ever blame God? Because a lot of people do, some people don't, but did you ever like get mad at God for letting this happen or whatever?
No.
That didn't?
No, never.
Well, when in the months that followed this, you and your sons are now trying to move on and try to sort of figure out how you're going to do life after, you know, you have a funeral and then you have all this grieving and whatever for months and whatever. What did you hear about Clint Little Jim and his legal situation in the time that followed? Did you hear much of what might happen to him?
Didn't hear a lot. I managed to, get some information to find out really what kind of person was, which is driver's record. I mean, he's no different than any other teenager. There wasn't any, he'd never been in any major problem. And, of course, I knew his name from, I think, at Norman High School when he played ball for them. And then, of course, being from Norman, I know so many people, I mean, you know, that I've got a little background on him there. But as far as the legal, what the state was doing, I didn't get really heavily involved in it at all. I was letting it take its course because I was handling my plate was full. Yeah. I was trying to get my direction going.
So you did find out about this sentencing, that he'd pled guilty and that there was a date set for his sentencing, and you showed up. And what did you say that day, and why did you do what you did?
Actually, the court called me 2-3 weeks maybe or something before the trial date and said, "What do you think we need to do?" And this is a kind of conjecture over another question later, but I had thought about it came to me driving home one night. I thought, you know, we've just got such a train wreck going here. How do we fix it? We have a young man who's starting his life. He's playing baseball. He's going to college. He's never been in any trouble. He did not set out that night to do what he did. It's like all of us. We were going out to have some fun, and it got out of hand.
Yep.
So I got to thinking about the system. It's not going to fix him, and it's not for me to put him in the system and ruin the rest of his life. How's my heart going to feel? What am I going to have to live with? And I told them the best thing they could do would be to give him a long probationary time, community service, counseling, and, you know, if he messes up again, well, then you deal with it.
And, you know, he said when he didn't know that until the judge was giving his sentence. And he said, I don't know if you know this, but, you know, J.J. Kearnes, and he said, without Mr. Kearnes having this viewpoint, I would have to send you to prison for at least it was a 5 to 20 year, you know, somewhere in there. He said, I would have to send you to prison. He said, but he has requested that you not get in that whole system that sometimes churns out people worse than when they came in, you know, which I'm sure is what you were thinking. And he said, when he heard those words, that you had done that and that he wasn't going to have to go to prison, he said his words were, God put it in that man's heart to do something for me that I didn't deserve. When you did that, were you thinking that God put this in my heart? Were you thinking this is just the right thing to do? Were you thinking this is what I would want somebody to do for me if I were in this situation? Or?
I would have to say God put it in my heart. As I was driving home down Highway 9, and all of a sudden that vision came on how to fix this situation the best we can. I mean, my life's upside down, but you know, to just stop the train wreck.
And when you found out then that he wasn't going to go to prison, he was going to have a deferred sentence, and the things basically that you requested. And then if he messed up again, then you would know, well, you know, then you know, maybe that's the kind of way he's going to live his life, but he didn't, you know. And so when you saw how it then affected his life to go forward, did you hear things about him? I know he came into the car dealership a couple of times and talked to you and so forth. How did you feel about it?
Had a lot of close friends. Even a real close friend of ours sat with their grandmother, you know, to take care of her during the day. So, and I had a lot of friends where I could get information. I didn't get a lot, and one day his dad pulled in the dealership, and it was probably, I'd say 8 years after that happened, possibly somewhere around there, and I went over and waited on him, and I think he was getting an oil change, and I wrote him up for his oil change, and he walked over by the door. After I'd finished processing everything, I walked over to him. I said, Mr. Little Jim, I don't know if you remember me or not. And then when I told him, you know, I could read his face.
Yeah.
And we visited for a while. And of course, I asked how was he doing, and he was telling me, you know, he'd married coaching and married a school teacher, and he was a school teacher, and which made me feel real good. And then, of course, next visit in, he brought his mother in, you know, his wife, and she came over to me and hugged me and cried on my shoulder. She says, "Please don't hate us." And I said, "Ma'am, no, there is no hate. You guys your family's wonderful." And then, of course, Clint even came in, brought his car in for Perrin, and got to meet him and, you know, visit with him and meet his wife and his kids. And so it's quite rewarding that people are the wealth of life. So, and everybody has their faults and everybody trips, but you just need to be open-minded and try to look beyond the situation to look for the answer to the problem. And I do believe that my co-pilot that got me through a lot of times that I could have been in a lot of trouble, put that in my heart.
Well, I think that, you know, when I've told people that you were coming and what you did, and we talked about it with Clint last week, that people were kind of, and I know personally, I sit back and go, I don't know if I could do that, you know, I don't, maybe I could, but I think, and I told JJ, I said, Clint kind of made him out to be a saint, you know, and he's going to have to live up to that billing, but he is extraordinarily grateful for what you did, and he now, of course, teaches kids, and he goes around and he speaks in churches and school assemblies and so forth. And so what you did has lived on here, these 20-something years, has lived on and made the difference in a lot of lives that will be saved because of what you did. And his life may have turned out very, very different if you hadn't done what you did.
Yeah, I kind of look like it is my wife didn't die in vain, that there was some good that come out of it, and just truly blessed that he turned out the way he did.
Well, last thing I wanted to ask you is, you know, people here have been hurt by maybe their spouse or a parent or a boss or, like in your case, a total stranger that did something that really had a big effect on our life, and they have a hard time getting over it. They have a hard time forgiving, or they have a hard time moving on. What would you say to people who are going through that, you know, from your perspective now?
Well, I know it's an awful dark time, but you have to put it behind you. You've possibly had control, or you didn't have control of the situation that happened. But what you have control of is today and tomorrow. And you can correct anything. Because you stop back and think, we all started in grade school, and we all started up through life, and we all had nothing to start with. So it's just you've got to, and one thing that helps you is if you're I was a people person. I know a lot of people. So you can vent to people, you can talk to people, people will listen to you. And that takes a lot of the burden off. It's not corked up inside of you. Mm-hmm. But you just need to try to put it all behind you. It's tough. It's never going to go away. It's always there. Just like I drive by the spot on Highway 9 every day. I've done it for 28 years. October will be 28 years. And my advice is you've got to be strong. Good Lord will open a window. If you'll just look for the window, it'll be there, and He can get you through it.
Well, JJ brought his wife of 20 years this week,
we just
and he had a
celebrated our
birthday the
20th
other day. So
anniversary.
introduce her, Barb, back there.
Thank you for having me here. Let's see, I turned 68 before my Alzheimer's sets in, and I can't remember it.
Well, I'm glad we got you before that. But no, thanks a lot. We really appreciate you coming, and it is an inspiration, I think, to all of us here to try to emulate what you did, what you managed to do with God's help, you know, whatever, but you managed to do something that a lot of people really struggle with, and we admire that, and we appreciate you coming and telling your story so we can be inspired and motivated to hopefully do the same ourselves.
Well, thank you.
Thanks a lot.
It was my pleasure.
All right. Okay.
Thank you for having me.